I've been involved in technology-enhanced education for now going on 30 years. I go back to having taught multimedia way back in the 80s in San Francisco at the Center for Electronic Art. But to update you more quickly, I was part of UC Berkeley's pioneering attempts to bring distance education into the university space. It was funded by the Sloan Foundation, not to be confused with the Sloan Consortium. And we put up 100 courses, and I was particularly in charge with the transference of what we had done with multimedia onto the web. And so this was the beginning of our real web-based distance education as we know it today. So my interest comes from that period of time, and we here at UCI, through the Dean of the Division of Continuing Education, Gary Matkin, we were involved with the Hewlett Foundation's efforts beginning in the early 2000s to both look at things like learning objects, things like modularity in higher education, how that would affect distance education. But soon enough, the Hewlett Foundation, thanks to the former Undersecretary of Education for the United States, Mike Marshall, became a real voice for open education, open courseware, as it was originally known, although it's evolved over the years. And so we set up meetings to discuss open textbooks. We were participants here at UCI with a number of meetings that we hosted for the Hewlett Foundation that brought people together around, particularly from the United States in those days. But then we followed MIT's lead into the area of open courseware. So by 2007, we were members of the Open Courseware Consortium, and Gary Matkin was the founding treasurer of that organization. So we've been really involved with this notion that we can expand access to higher education, first through distance education itself, and then in a straight line to open education to remove barriers of finance, time, circumstance, whatever you have. So that's really my evolution. Is by 2007, I'd gone from being the director of course production, instructional design at UC Irvine to being to being in charge of the new Open Education project. And currently, I'm then the Associate Dean for Open Education at the University of California, Irvine. It's still a bit of a unique title. Not many universities have it, so I've been very pleased to do that. And as part of our work with the Open Courseware Consortium, I then became, for a couple of years, for 2 terms, the president of the consortium itself. So we have a deep involvement in it, and but you can see it's sort of, in some ways, it's a straight path. It's from projects that were very much related to the new era of open education. I started the MOOC project at UC Irvine, and it's been a great learning experience over the years. It's actually, I'd say the phrase open courseware is evolving. So at first it was course materials. It was materials organized in the shape of a course that were released under a Creative Commons license for use, reuse, adaptation, and again, following the lead of MIT that put up 1,800 courses with at least some materials for each one of them. We started along that route of opening up courses by presenting course materials. Now, we had the advantage that we used initially some instructionally designed materials. So we put up things that really did look very much like a full course narrative. Since then, what really has jump-started our project has been the focus on chemistry. And I tell people who are going into open education now, don't just put up one course. One course can't even be found anymore. You have to have a project, and you have to think on a scale that's larger than the course. And you have to drive into the area of your specialization. So what we did was we said, we had a professor who is an evangelist, James Noack, who brought the idea of open education into his department, into the School of Physical Sciences. And he was the first person to do it and made it legitimate for others to follow. So today we have 16 courses in chemistry available on YouTube, on our website, some with lecture notes, but at a minimum, all of the videos of the classes, all topically organized. So it's now possible to download the spreadsheet and search on a topic, and then actually click on a link and get a 7-minute explanation in some area of chemistry. So this just really caught on the web. Our channel gets, just for chemistry alone, we get 1 million views per year on YouTube for an average of 7 minutes. So we have about 7 million minutes viewed per year. And we're now looking at, now that we've gone that far, what else do we need to do? And I know you've got some other follow-up questions, so I'm going to leave that for later in our discussion. But that at least was what made a difference here at UCI, is that we had the Dean of the School of Physical Sciences, Ken Janda, who's a chemist himself, who openly endorsed this project, who proposed to all of the faculty in the 4 departments that he oversees that people should be doing open education now. And it doesn't have a high cost, and it reaches huge audiences. So.
And what's the incentive for a university to offer up the content of their courses for free, open access to everybody?
Right. Well, the first thing is that it is low cost for us. So when we did this project with chemistry, we spent about $75,000 on it. Now, $75,000 is actually not a lot of money, even for a university, even in these times when we're all a bit starved for cash. So it wasn't something that the professors themselves had to do a lot of work on, aside from showing up in class and maybe sending us some PowerPoints or some other materials. So it was actually very easy for them to participate. Now, the incentive for the university, in our case, we think is a no-brainer. It will differ from institution to institution. So because we already have a good reputation, we're relatively well ranked in all the various indexes, it's easy for people to trust us and to use our materials. And because of that, the advantage to the institution was that you can literally preview a class in chemistry, for sure, but in many other areas, before you decide that you want to send in an application. Or you can, if you're in the graduate level, you can actually look at a professor teaching before you decide whether you want to study with them. And we did, we don't have follow-up data. So we have a very early study that was done of prospective students to UCI, who at that time, 12% at the graduate level and also 12% at the undergraduate level, were previewing courses as part of their decision-making process. And by previewing, I mean primarily on our channel. And we think that's probably doubled since then, but we don't know because we don't have the same study having been repeated. It's an expensive study to carry out. But we also know then that students who enter the university and study for 4 years, that they're using these video lectures. So we said, how many of you are using video lectures? Again, the dominant mode is the OpenCourseware materials, but there's also other things that people can access. So we haven't quite disentangled it, although we actually did ask about specific channels. So we would say, how many of you are using the ones on YouTube, which is almost all our materials. And we'd find that we have 2/3 of the students that are using those video lectures. And then on top of that, we asked how effective it was. Now, I don't want to overstate it, because it's a self-understanding of effectiveness, of educational effectiveness. And it's not tied into other kinds of results that we would need to measure. But at least at a minimum, we have students who said 2/3 of them say it's effective, and 81% who said it's effective or very effective, and 2/3 who were effective, and the rest said it was very effective. So those are very, very good numbers. And so the benefits for the university range from the fact that it's most closely articulated with our educational processes here at UCI. So if you get a course in general chemistry, and even if it's not your instructor, your professor, you at least know that the chemistry department regulates what needs to be taught in general chemistry. So there's a tie-in. And then for the others, we just have a series of testimonials of people who said, I didn't understand this. I didn't get a good explanation like I got on this site. So we established in chemistry, and I just want to encourage people to do it in every other subject, is we've got a site that people trust. They go to it for one explanation. They go, oh, that's a good explanation. And then they come back, because they know that the general level of quality of explanation of topics is very high. So to me, that's the benefit to the university. And we're a public university, and our mission is to not just educate our own students, but to educate California and the rest of the world. So the service mission of the university is fulfilled through OpenCourseware, or as we're beginning to rebrand ourselves, UCI Open.
Talking about the rest of the world, how does your OpenCourseware compare to MOOCs, massive open online courses, which you also offer?
That's a great question. As I mentioned earlier, I initiated the contacts with Coursera. UCI participates with Coursera, and in fact is one of the universities that has quite a lot of traffic towards the very top end of their spectrum. And I would say that they serve different roles, but I actually wanted for a second back up and say they share the same problem as well. And the problem is this, that OpenCourseware, if you look at the people who benefited from it, often it was people who are capable, not just had internet access, but had a good skills at searching for information they needed, were able to really take advantage of open materials on the web. And the same is true for people who use Coursera or edX or any other MOOC, is that we tend to repeat ourselves by getting the benefits of open and free educational resources to those who least need it. So I don't want to make too big a point about that, because I think it is a necessary step towards expanding access to higher education. But I do want to point out that while we get huge numbers of visits from Coursera, we get a couple of million visitors from that path alone. We get another million for chemistry alone through OpenCourseware. That we have to begin to think how we're really using these resources and develop projects that expands out of the usual suspects who already have degrees and are already part of the better off in the world. So, however, what the MOOCs did, and they pushed on us a bit in the open courseware movement, because what they did is they showed us that it wasn't enough to put up materials. You really needed to have an instructional narrative. So that narrative they're doing primarily through video. You can be a little bit critical of doing everything through video, although we're big users of that. But the big thing is with the MOOCs is that they at least had a consistent way in which somebody could listen throughout a course to an explanation that is course length, just like I mentioned, topical explanations for Open Chem. These are course length explanations with things that are proven to be effective, such as frequent low stakes assessment. So they introduced some things that really needed to be introduced. And so you won't find anyone in OpenCourseWare who's against the idea of MOOCs. That is, the introduction of scale is good when it's used appropriately. I personally still think the MOOCs have a long way to go towards demonstrating educational effectiveness. And one of the big problems they have is how weak the peer environment is in MOOCs. So it's used for peer assessment primarily, but the interaction, we know that learning is social, and the interaction between these various people, these 100,000 people in a course, is really, really minimal. It's more like a large discussion forum with a little bit of social media style promotion of the most active learners to be the peer leaders. But it's a very weak use of peer education. And that's, I'll talk about it a little bit later perhaps, but that's where we're trying to go with the Open Chem project, is to introduce peer learning into it. Anyway,
well,
I'll take your next.
Forward to hearing about that. You mentioned earlier the fact that MOOCs don't actually cater for the people who need it the most.
That's a perfect segue, because you know, in the 6 years I've been on the board of directors of the African Virtual University, I've watched tremendous growth on their side. But from the beginning, they have used open educational resources as really a fundamental part of what they do, because their mission, the way they operate is with university partners offering the degrees. There's now some discussion that they'll eventually become a degree granting university themselves, but they'll maintain the partnerships. But in any case, they have as their mission the expansion of higher education on the African continent. So this perspective meant for them a real belief in open educational resources. And the best example I can give was at a conference. I was at a conference, eLearning Africa, one of the largest e-learning conference on the continent. And I was with the rector of the African Virtual University at one of the sessions. The rector is Bakary Diallo, and this person came up to him and said, "Thank you very much for your teacher education program in math and science. We're using it." He goes like, "What do you mean you're using it?" He says, "Well, we downloaded everything and it was better than what we were doing. So now that's become our program. That's the curriculum for our program, is what we downloaded from the web legally with fulfilling the purpose of open educational resources. And now that's the way we offer it." And I think it was Burundi, if I'm not mistaken. So this notion that you can develop full curriculum, they're doing one now in computer science, and that it could be available to anyone free of charge, eliminated the barriers not just for an individual, but for an entire institution. So the way in which education is expanded means that that university didn't have to spend time and money developing that curriculum, and therefore could use that same amount towards other purposes. So the other thing, they're beginning to work on the, they've introduced their first MOOC. They're going to do a second MOOC now. And so they're working hard to see how could we do something towards scale. So the conversation there is really about the largest group in, which is secondary students in Africa, for whom there are no spots at the existing higher education institutions. So a lot of governments now are starting programs in open universities, ways to expand their access. Governments are in conversation with the African Virtual University to offer degrees directly, particularly in West Africa. But how do we get this expanded from what in some places very low numbers, like I can't remember if it's the Ivory Coast or another country, but it's something like only 2% of high school graduates end up at the university. So it's a very, very low participation rate. So how do they expand this quickly? Well, it has to be through open and distance education, because the costs of buildings and so forth, and even the availability of faculty are really huge obstacles there. So working from that end, that the AVU understands, number one, that the materials themselves need to be freely available, so that what you need, that the idea that you're going to charge for this or anything like that, some commercial advantage could be gained, is completely out of what they do. So the first part is open educational resources, but the second part then is to begin to develop this capacity to have universities to train more instructors and to use MOOCs to address the needs of people who can't get into universities. So for example, Africa needs a larger skilled workforce. And so there's a lot of people who graduate secondary school and they just can't get into a university. They apply 4 years in a row. In Nigeria, they'll apply 4 years in a row and not get in. And they have the grades, the test scores. There just aren't enough spots. So to meet the needs of the skilled workforce, we have to develop at a scale courses that will help people begin to play a role in the African economy of the years to come. And so the AVU begins to look at MOOCs in that way, is that it can reach, because we have the opportunity to do it at scale, we can reach far more people and we can target it so that we're hitting those areas that are most needed in the skilled workforce, rather than per se addressing people who might then graduate with degrees, and the lag in time that involves, and the fact that you might have to leave your job to attend the university, all of those problems. They're trying to look at it in a variety of different ways, expand access to degree granting institutions, but also expand at a scale access to specific post-secondary training needs. Well, it really varies. I mean, the threat of disruption is always, we always hear the threat of disruption. There's really been very little disruption. I mean, compare the articles that were appearing in the New York Times 3 years ago that said, the tsunami is overtaking higher education. And you look and you say, even with all the things and the growth of Coursera and edX and so forth, you don't see that kind of disruption. And part of the reason is that the university systems, they have an entire package, and it's more than just even undergraduate education. It's also the fact that you learn in a social environment, and universities are providing that. They're providing research opportunities. There's all sorts of things that really aren't well done outside of that. So examination by degree is actually a separate issue for me. It's really, really important. For example, we have in California that we have the community colleges where the prerequisites in mathematics are still so significant for people that they end up dropping out of community college, not continuing with it. And I don't mean prerequisites, but the courses they have to take at community college to get into a transfer path. So what we'd really like to do is find ways in which we can ease that. And already the community colleges of California have one project in online education that's bringing together the 100 different community colleges into a single online environment. But one of the things they're proposing, they haven't done it yet, but they're proposing that credit by examination be given. And if we can lower the dropout rate, which at community colleges is astronomical, and they're exactly the people we need to have a better education and to persist in higher education. Exactly that target group. If we can use a credit by exam so that they can take something, even fail it, but take it again at low cost, flexibly, and be able to get higher graduation rates from community college, then we will have achieved something miraculous. There's places, for example, in Indonesia, where they used OpenCourseWare plus credit by exam for years now in computer science. And one of the reasons was they have a number of world-class computer science faculty, but they don't have enough of them. And they have, what is it in Indonesia, 15,000 islands, or when the moon is in a certain position, it's 18,000. So the problem of actually having people attend a physical structure is, you can imagine what that's like. So why not get the best course materials and courses you can to them and allow them to complete at least a significant portion of their degree by exam? And in the case of computer science, the Ministry of Education accepted the number of 30% of credits could come by examination. So the model should be used correctly. That is, it should be used exactly the same way we look at a total project of expanding access to higher education and student success. And so I don't think it has to be, people should be looking at it like, well, first of all, we know that no one is going to drop out of Harvard to take, credits, by exam, right? They're just not going to do that. At the elite private schools around the world, it's the social network that students see as the primary advantage, along with the excellence of the education itself. But the social network is very, very important. So what we're really talking about are, well, in the US, we have a lot of for-profits. Perhaps there's a little danger to them. I mean, there has been some, they've had some difficulties lately, partially because of pressure from the Department of Education in the United States, but partially also because there are so many other alternatives now. And so if you're paying the high rates of tuition at a for-profit compared to the low cost of community college education, then you might see that credit by exam poses a threat to them, but not necessarily to where there's an opportunity to be in a social environment, near your house, flexibly. So again, the threats of disruption, yeah, there's some at the margins, there are threats of disruption, but it's actually, the real problem is not getting people as educated as we need them to be. Once we look at it that way, it's not a threat, it's an opportunity.
Absolutely, Larry. And to finish off, I'd like to hear about what your future projects might be?
So I mentioned peer learning. I'm really thinking about this now. Now, I played a tiny role a few years ago with peer-to-peer university. So I've been thinking about peer learning for a long time. But if you look at the research on peer-led study, there's some caveats to it, but more or less they find a really good educational effect from either replacing lecture classes with peer-led study or using it as a supplement. And there's one specific model that's been fairly successful called supplemental instruction, to the extent that it's a face-to-face peer learning environment. But because it's been so effective, I kept thinking, why not do it online? And just to give you some idea of the effects, one of the studies said that women and underrepresented minorities actually have stronger improvements than others. So all of a sudden you've got this peer environment that lets people really participate, work together to solve problems, that kind of thing. And it's in the face-to-face environment, it's really shown as being a very effective thing, including for the people we'd like to target. We want, for example, more women to be in the sciences. Well, we get better results from this than we do from sitting in a class for 50 minutes and listening to somebody talk. So, but the problem with online, with everything, is that you're always crossing the hurdle of distance. And so you either have to be you have to both be more efficient, which we've been good at demonstrating how efficient we are in online education, open education, MOOCs, etc. But now we also have to combine that with showing that we're also at least as effective. And that's been the hurdle. And with a peer environment, you can imagine if I'm in a face-to-face situation, I grab 3 of my friends, I go to the library, we start opening up books, and we start working together. It's like a very clear model of how we do this. So how do we do it online? How do we grab our friends and go to the library? So what we're working on here is a peer platform, a peer learning platform. Their prototype is done, and we're just about to do some work on preparing a video and looking for funding to expand this. But we have Open Chem, we have hundreds of topics in chemistry, all at 6 to 8 minutes length. Why can't we combine it with open textbooks so that an explanation of a topic, there's a video you can watch for 7 minutes, a piece of text that's 3 paragraphs long that shows another thing, that has the problems and solutions at your fingertips, that can give you challenge questions. Why not marry that possibility to trained peer leaders who know the curriculum, who have already gotten a good grade in the subject and can help others? And why not create a platform that then lets you make the invitation either as part of a structured class or an online class, if you will, that doesn't have the capability of meeting in person, or even across institutions, or even on the open web? Why not create a platform that marries all of that with a trained peer leader, with people who would come in, and the model is bring your problems, let's discuss it. I don't mean your social problems, bring your problems in chemistry. We're going to do this now. And be able to actually identify the resources more quickly than you could open a textbook. That becomes the possibility of marrying an efficiency of an online environment with the effectiveness of peer learning. So that is something that we are in discussions with other people. I've had discussions with the MIT Media Lab, with people in peer-to-peer university. But that's what I think needs to be done next in online education. And if we do it right, we can strengthen online education, We can strengthen classroom education by having it as a supplement, and we can strengthen the open web by allowing people to have a big lobby where they can come if they're looking for help in chemistry, and then move into a breakout room like MIT Media Labs on Hangouts is what they call it, and then move into a breakout room to work together. So this notion is very exciting to me, and it addresses what I've found to be the weaknesses, because it targets people who are currently learning, people who are currently in institutions, rather than the graduates, right? The people with BAs and MAs and PhDs who are in our MOOCs and downloading our open courseware. Instead, we actually target people who have an issue with understanding some specific concept and could use some help. And so that's very exciting to me.
It certainly does sound very exciting. And is it something that's likely to be made open and public soon, or has it got a long way to go?
As soon it will be. What we want to do is we want to actually look for funding opportunities for this, so that we can actually take it to the next step, which would be to make it a very robust environment. For example, we'd like to combine what we've done in prototype with what the capabilities of Hangouts are. And so if we can combine those two things on the platform level, and then even have a gap analysis done in chemistry, so we see that we've developed the resources that we need to completely cover general and organic chemistry. There's a few things like that, and the funds to then actually populate a peer learning environment with trained peer leaders. That's really going to be the key. So, hold on. The software itself that we develop, we usually develop something, then we put it out as open source. So even the website software we have for UCI was just released today in GitHub as open source software. So that's our tradition. We'll undoubtedly continue with this as well. But we are at the point where we've done a prototype, and the Hangouts software from MIT Media Lab is open source already. So we're looking at how to combine those things.
Well, I very much look forward to seeing how that develops and what comes out at the end. Larry, thank you very, very much. That was absolutely fascinating listening to you, and I'm sure our viewers will find it equally fascinating. And I wish you all the best with this project.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Bye-bye, Larry.
Bye-bye.